Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Chad Herman stood in his kitchen, pouring his second cup of coffee as golden morning light filtered through the windows. At 34, he'd built what most would call a good life. A successful career as a senior software engineer, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and 7 years of marriage to Christy. His military intelligence background had translated well into civilian cybersecurity work, though these days his biggest challenges involved debugging code rather than analyzing enemy communications. "I'm heading out," Christy called from the hallway, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She appeared in the doorway, immaculate in a navy business suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Scott wants the quarterly reports by noon." Chad noticed the way her voice changed when she mentioned her boss. Softer, almost careful. He dismissed it as stress. Christy had been working late frequently since her promotion to senior account manager at Meridian Financial 6 months ago. "Another long day?" he asked, studying her face. "Probably. Don't wait up." She kissed his cheek quickly, already mentally elsewhere, and was gone. Chad heard their neighbor, Dean Fritz, calling out from his driveway as Christy pulled away. Dean was a retired postal worker, a friendly man in his 60s who'd lived on their street for 20 years. Chad stepped outside with his coffee. "Morning, Dean. Early start today." Dean shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Christy's disappearing car. "Chad, can I ask you something? Is your wife working from home these days?" "No, she works at the office." "Why?" Dean's weathered face creased with concern. "It's just, I see her home every afternoon. Around 2:30. Her car's in the driveway for an hour or so. Then she leaves again. Been happening for a few weeks now." The words hit Chad like cold water. "You sure it's her car?" "Same silver Lexus. Same license plate." Dean looked genuinely troubled. "Look, maybe it's nothing. Maybe she's running home for lunch or something. I just thought, well, if it were me, I want to know." Chad's mind raced, his analytical training kicking in automatically. Christy never mentioned coming home. She always said she ate at her desk or grabbed something with colleagues. "Thanks for telling me, Dean. I appreciate it." Back inside, Chad sat at his kitchen table, fingers drumming against the wood. His phone buzzed, a text from Pete Gaines, his friend from his Army days who now ran a security consulting firm in the city. "Drinks Thursday? Been too long, brother." Chad stared at the message, then at the empty house around him. The logical part of his brain, the part that had earned him commendations in military intelligence, began constructing possibilities, examining patterns. Christy's late nights, her distraction, the way she'd become protective of her phone, her newfound friendship with Scott Walker, the regional VP she reported to. He opened his laptop and pulled up their home security system. They'd installed cameras last year after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. Front door, back door, driveway. He scrolled through the footage archives, finding Tuesday afternoon. There it was. Christy's Lexus pulling into the driveway at 2:17 p.m. She got out, checking her phone, then walked to the front door. Alone. The timestamp showed she left again at 3:42 p.m. Chad's jaw tightened. He checked Monday. Same pattern. Friday the week before. A rhythm of deception. He'd spent years analyzing intelligence, identifying patterns, predicting behavior. The signs were there, had been there, and he'd missed them because he'd trusted her. Because love made you blind to the obvious. But Chad Herman wasn't the type to act on emotion. When he'd worked intelligence, the key to every operation was information, complete, verified, actionable information. He needed to know exactly what he was dealing with before making any moves. He pulled out his phone and replied to Pete. "Thursday works. Actually, I might need your professional expertise on something. Bring your work brain." Then Chad did something that would have been unthinkable a week ago. He called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow, he wouldn't leave for the office. Tomorrow, he'd stay home and discover the truth. Chapter 2, The Hidden Truth. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Chad went through his usual routine: shower, coffee, breakfast. Christy seemed more relaxed than usual, chatting about a new restaurant they should try, mentioning a work trip to Dallas next month. The lies came so easily to her now. "I'll probably be late again," she said, grabbing her briefcase. Scott scheduled a meeting with the Houston clients at 4. Chad nodded, playing his part. "No problem. Be safe." The moment her car disappeared down the street, Chad moved. He'd parked his truck in the garage the night before, closed the door. To anyone watching, the house appeared empty. He set his phone to silent and positioned himself where he had a clear view of both the front door and the staircase leading to the second floor. The hours crawled. Chad sat in the study adjacent to the living room, hidden from view but able to see through the partially open door. His military training had taught him patience, how to remain still, alert, focused. He'd once spent 14 hours in a surveillance post in Kandahar. This was nothing. At 2:23 p.m., he heard it, the distinctive purr of Christie's Lexus engine. His pulse quickened, but his breathing remained steady. The front door opened. "Can't do this much longer." Christie's voice drifted in, and she wasn't alone. "Chad's been asking questions about my schedule. So tell him about the Dallas trip. Buy us more time." A male voice. Scott Walker. Chad had met him twice at company events. Tall, athletic build, prematurely silver hair that he wore like a badge of distinction. The kind of man who thought his corner office made him untouchable. "I hate lying to him," Christie said, but her voice lacked conviction. Scott laughed, a sound without warmth. "You've been doing fine so far. Besides, you're not lying. You're protecting him from unnecessary pain until we figure this out." They moved into the living room, and Chad could see them now through the crack in the door. Scott pulled Christie close, and she didn't resist. The kiss that followed was intimate, familiar. Not a first-time indiscretion. This was practiced routine. Chad's hands clenched, but he remained perfectly still. "Observe. Document. React later. What are you telling Martha?" Christie asked, pulling back slightly. "Soon. I'm working on it. These things take time. The prenup custody arrangements for the kids. I need to be strategic." Chad's analytical mind filed that away. Scott had children, a wife at home, and here he was, spinning the same lies to Christie that countless cheaters had used throughout history. "You said that last month," Christie pressed. "And I mean it." Scott's voice took on an edge. "Unless you're getting cold feet? Because that wouldn't be good for anyone, especially you. You know how much I've invested in your career, Christie. Your promotion, the bonuses, those recommendations. I'd hate for people to think you slept your way into that position." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Chad felt ice form in his veins. This wasn't just an affair. Scott was leveraging Christie's career, manipulating her. Christie stiffened. "That's not fair. I earned everything." "Of course you did," Scott soothed, but his eyes were calculating. "I'm just saying we're in this together. All the way, right?" She nodded slowly, and Chad saw something he hadn't expected. Fear beneath the guilt in his wife's face. Whatever this relationship was, it wasn't equal. Scott had power over her, and he knew it. They headed upstairs. Chad heard the bedroom door close. He could have confronted them then, burst in with righteous anger. But that wasn't how you won wars. You won by understanding your enemy completely, finding their vulnerabilities, then striking with precision. Chad remained in position, using the time to think, to plan. Scott Walker wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who used his position to manipulate employees. That suggested a pattern. One affair might be a mistake, but this kind of calculated behavior, this was someone who'd done it before. An hour later, he heard movement upstairs. Whispered goodbyes. Christie left first, her Lexus pulling away at 3:38 p.m. 5 minutes later, Scott's black BMW departed. Chad stood slowly, muscles stiff from remaining motionless. He walked upstairs, stood in the bedroom doorway. The bed was unmade, evidence of their betrayal. But instead of rage, he felt something colder, a tactical clarity he hadn't experienced since his military days. He pulled out his phone and texted Pete. "Need to move our meeting to tonight. My place. Bring your discreet investigation toolkit. I've got a target that needs a deep background check." Then he called Drew Schwartz, a private investigator he'd met through work, someone who specialized in corporate malfeasance and personal investigations. "Drew, it's Chad Herman. I need your services. Full surveillance and background on a subject, and I need it fast." Money's not an issue. What are we looking at? Infidelity, possible workplace coercion, and I'm betting a pattern of behavior. The target is Scott Walker, Regional VP at Meridian Financial. I want to know everything. Past relationships, former employees, any complaints, sealed settlements, everything. Drew whistled low. That's a corporate player. This could get complicated. That's why I'm hiring the best. And Drew? Discretion is critical. No one can know I'm digging. Understood. I'll start tonight. Chad ended the call and walked to his home office. He opened his laptop and created a new encrypted folder labeled Project Accountability. Inside, he began documenting everything. Dates, times, the footage from today, Dean's observations, screenshots of Christie's calendar, irregularities he'd noticed. He wasn't acting on emotion. He was building a case. And when he had all the pieces, Scott Walker would discover that ruining lives had consequences. Chapter 3. The Architect Emerges. Pete Gaines arrived at 8 p.m. sharp, carrying a tactical case that looked like ordinary luggage. At 46, Pete had transitioned from Army intelligence to private security, but he still carried himself like a soldier, alert, efficient, deadly when necessary. "You look terrible," Pete observed, setting down his case in Chad's home office. "Found out my wife's sleeping with her boss this afternoon. Hid in my own house like a stalker to confirm it." Chad's voice was eerily calm. Pete's expression hardened. "You holding up?" "I'm functional. Emotional breakdown comes later. Right now, I need operational mode." Chad opened his laptop, showing Pete the documented evidence. The target is Scott Walker, VP at Meridian Financial. Married, 2 kids. He's been coercing Christie, using her career as leverage. Pete studied the screen. That's not just an affair. That's workplace exploitation. Exactly. And guys like this don't stop at one victim. I need you to help me find a pattern. What's the endgame here, Chad? Chad met his friend's eyes. Complete destruction. I want his career finished, his marriage exposed, his reputation obliterated. And I want it done systematically, so he knows exactly who did it and why. Pete nodded slowly. "You're talking about war. I'm talking about justice. You in?" "Brother, I've been in since you called." Pete opened his case, revealing sophisticated surveillance equipment. "Let's start with his digital footprint. You got access to their company network. I built their security infrastructure last year as a contractor. Still have administrative backdoors." Chad's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Completely illegal to use them, of course. Good thing I didn't hear that." Pete pulled up a chair. "What are we looking for?" "Communications. Scott mentioned a prenup, kids, being strategic. I want his emails, his calendar, his text messages if we can get them. And I want information on any female employees who left the company suddenly in the past 5 years. They worked in synchronized silence, the kind that came from years of operational partnership." Chad navigated through Meridian systems while Pete set up monitoring software. "Got something," Pete said after an hour. Email thread between Scott and HR from 3 years ago. Regina Raymond, former account manager, filed a sexual harassment complaint. It was settled confidentially, sealed. She left with a severance package. Chad's jaw tightened. "Find her. I want to talk to her." "There's more." Joni Russo left 2 years ago. Crystal Holden, 18 months ago. All from Scott's department. All sudden departures with sealed settlements. He's been hunting in his own department for years. Chad stood pacing. The company's been covering it up, paying victims to stay quiet. His phone buzzed. Drew Schwartz. "Chad, preliminary reports interesting. Scott Walker has a sealed divorce record from 15 years ago. First wife claimed adultery and psychological abuse in the filing, but it was settled out of court. He remarried 10 years ago to Martha Burt. Comes from money. Family owns a pharmaceutical distribution company. So he married up, needs the wife's money or connections. Gets better. I found a private Instagram account. One of those anonymous ones. User is Truth About SW. Post dating back 6 months, all about Scott Walker being a predator, using his position to manipulate women. Graphic details about his MO, the promises, the threats, the pattern. Chad's mind raced. Can you identify who runs the account? Working on it. But whoever it is, they've been trying to warn people. Posts are mostly ignored, only a few dozen followers. But the information is solid, detailed. Has to be someone who knows him well. Keep digging. And Drew? Find out everything about Martha Walker. Where she goes, who she talks to, her routine. She's going to be a key player. After Pete left at midnight with assignments to track down the former employees, Chad sat alone in his office. The house felt different now, contaminated by betrayal. He pulled up photos from his and Christie's wedding, her smile radiant, his own face full of hope and trust. That man was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that mercy was for people who deserved it. His phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Chad Herman? A woman's voice, hesitant. Who's asking? My name is Regina Raymond. Pete Gaines tracked me down, said you wanted to talk about Scott Walker. Is it true? Is he doing it again? Chad's hand tightened on the phone. Yes. A bitter laugh. Of course he is. Who's the victim this time? My wife. Silence. Then, softly, I'm sorry. I tried to stop him, you know. Reported him, filed complaints. They buried it. Paid me to disappear. I was 26, needed the money, scared of what he'd do to my career. I took the settlement and stayed quiet. I'm not interested in staying quiet, Chad said. And I'm not taking settlements. I'm interested in making sure he never does this to anyone else. What do you need from me? Everything. Your story, documentation, anything you kept. And I need you to connect me with Joni Russo and Crystal Holden. I'm betting you all know each other. We do. Victims of the same predator tend to find each other. But the NDAs won't matter when this is over. Scott Walker broke your lives. I'm going to return the favor. But I need ammunition. Will you help me? Another pause. Yes. God, yes. What's the plan? Chad smiled, but held no warmth. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. But first, I need to finish gathering intelligence. Can you meet me tomorrow? For anything you have, emails, text messages, records. Don't worry about the NDAs. When I'm done, his lawyers will be too busy defending him in criminal court to worry about civil violations. Criminal court? Scott Walker's been using his position to coerce employees into these sexual relationships. That's not just an HR problem, Regina. In many jurisdictions, that's sexual assault by coercion, and workplace intimidation, and fraud. If he promised career advancement, he couldn't or wouldn't deliver. I'm going to make sure every relevant authority knows about it. You could hear the hope in her voice. You can really do this? I spent 10 years in military intelligence. I know how to build an airtight case, how to leverage information, how to destroy targets. Scott Walker made a critical mistake. He threatened someone I love. He's about to learn what happens when you make an enemy of someone who knows how to fight back. After the call ended, Chad opened his encrypted folder and created a new document. Operation Reckoning. Phase 1 complete. Below it, he began outlining the next steps. He had the evidence of the affair. He had testimony from previous victims. He had access to corporate communications. And he had the skills to orchestrate a takedown that would be both legal and devastating. Scott Walker had used his power to manipulate vulnerable people. Now Chad would use knowledge, strategy, and patience to dismantle everything Scott had built. The game had begun, and this time, the predator had become the prey. Chapter 4. The pattern revealed. The coffee shop was deliberately public, neutral ground where Regina Raymond could feel safe. Chad arrived early, positioning himself where he could see the entrance. At 31, Regina had rebuilt her career at a smaller firm. But Pete's research showed she'd never fully recovered from her time at Meridian. Her trajectory had flatlined after leaving, years of potential wasted because one man couldn't keep his abuse of power in check. She arrived at exactly 10 a.m., looking around nervously before spotting Chad. Medium height, dark hair pulled back, professional but guarded. The wariness in her eyes spoke of hard-earned survival instincts. "Thank you for coming," Chad said as she sat down. "I almost didn't." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "The NDA, the fear, it doesn't just go away. But Pete said you were serious about stopping him. Dead serious. Tell me what happened." Regina took a breath. "I was 25 when I started at Meridian. Scott was my supervisor. Charming, attentive, made me feel special. It started small. compliments, lunch meetings that ran long, texts after hours. By the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep. How long did it last? 6 months. He promised me a senior position, said he was leaving his wife, all the classic lines. But when I tried to end it, he changed. Threatened to fire me, said I'd seduced him and he'd make sure everyone knew. So my career would be over. Her voice cracked. I was terrified. So I went to HR, and they buried it. Worse, they made me feel like I was the problem. Said there was no evidence of coercion, that it appeared to be a consensual relationship that had soured. Scott's version, that I was a scorned woman making false accusations, became the official story. They offered me 6 months' salary and a strict NDA. I took it because I had student loans, rent, and no other job lined up. Chad's expression remained neutral, but inside, rage burned cold and focused. Did you keep anything? Texts, emails. Regina pulled out a flash drive. Everything. I knew someday someone would need to see it. The texts where he promised promotions. The emails with implied threats. Voice messages where he's clearly manipulating me. And the HR communications showing they knew and chose to protect him. Why didn't you go to the police? And say what? My boss and I had a relationship, and he was mean when it ended? The texts are suggestive, but not explicit about the coercion. His lawyers would have destroyed me. I was a junior employee, he was a VP. No one would have believed me. She met his eyes. But if there are others, if we can show a pattern, there are others. Joni Russo and Crystal Holden. And now my wife. God, I'm sorry. How much does she know about his history? Nothing. She thinks she's special, that he's leaving his wife for her. She doesn't know she's just the latest conquest. Regina shook her head bitterly. That's his playbook. Make them feel unique while dangling career advancement. And if they resist or try to leave, the threats come out. Does your wife know you're aware? Not yet. I'm gathering everything first. When I move, it'll be comprehensive. What's your plan? Chad leaned forward. Scott has been protected by corporate structure and NDAs. But if I can gather enough evidence, enough testimony, I can go beyond civil complaints. Coercion in a workplace relationship can constitute sexual harassment under federal law, possibly assault, depending on the jurisdiction. The company's pattern of covering it up suggests systematic violation of employment law. And if I can prove fraud, promises of advancement he never intended to keep, that opens other legal avenues. You're not just going after him. You're going after the company, too. Meridian enabled him. They chose their VP over justice. Yes, they're complicit. Chad's voice was steel. But I need Joni and Crystal willing to testify. Can you set up a meeting? I'll try. But they're scared, Chad. We all are. Scott has power, money, lawyers. So did a lot of targets I took down overseas. Power is only effective if you know it's coming. I'm going to hit him from angles he won't see until it's too late. Chad stood. Make that meeting happen. And Regina? This time, you're not alone. That evening, Chad sat across from Pete Gaines in his office, the flash drive from Regina connected to his laptop. This is damning, Pete said, scrolling through messages. Clear quid pro quo. Play along and you'll get the promotion. Don't make this difficult or things will get complicated for you. He's not even subtle. Arrogance. He's gotten away with it so long. He stopped being careful. Chad pulled up another document. Drew sent over Scott's financial records. He has access through public records and some creative research. Scott's leveraged to the hilt. Big house, expensive cars, private school for the kids. He's living on credit and his wife's family money. So if the wife leaves, his lifestyle collapses. The prenup Drew found gives Martha most of the assets if he commits adultery. Scott's entire existence depends on keeping his marriage intact while he plays predator at work. Pete leaned back. You're not just planning to expose him. You're planning to dismantle his entire life. He dismantled Regina's career, traumatized Crystal and Joni, and manipulated my wife using her job security. Fair's fair. What about Christy? She's not innocent here. Chad's jaw tightened. She's a victim who became complicit. Scott manipulated her, but she still made choices. She'll face consequences. I'm not protecting her from this. But my priority is the predator, not the prey he groomed. His phone buzzed. Regina. Joni and Crystal agreed to meet. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. at my place. They're terrified, but angry enough to try. Chad, be prepared. Their stories are worse than mine. Worse how? Crystal was 19, an intern. Joni had just gotten divorced, was vulnerable. He picks targets who are easy to manipulate, then uses increasingly aggressive tactics. With Crystal, Regina's voice faltered. Just be prepared. The call ended. Pete watched Chad's expression darken. This guy's a monster, Pete said quietly. Monsters can be killed. You just need to know where to aim. Chad opened a new document. Here's the plan. Phase 1 is gathering evidence. Done. Phase 2 is building the coalition. In progress. Phase 3 is the exposure, timed and coordinated for maximum impact. And Phase 4, revenge. Justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Justice is calculated. Chad's eyes were hard. I'm going to make sure Scott Walker faces every consequence he's avoided, that Meridian Financial answers for its complicity, and that no one else becomes his victim. And I'm going to do it so thoroughly, so systematically, that he'll never recover. And your wife? Chad was silent for a moment. Christy made her choices. When this is over, she'll have to live with them. But I won't let her be defined by Scott Walker's manipulation. She gets a chance to rebuild. Him? He gets exactly what he deserves. Nothing less, nothing more. Pete nodded slowly. You're not the same guy I served with. That Chad would have just beat the hell out of him and called it done. That Chad trusted the world to be fair. This one knows better. This one understands that real victory comes from dismantling your enemy so completely they can't rise again. Chad closed his laptop. Tomorrow we meet the others. Then we start Phase 3. What's Phase 3? Chad smiled. Cold, calculated, dangerous. We introduce Scott Walker to his past. All of it. At once. In front of everyone who matters. Chapter 5, The Coalition. Regina Raymond's apartment was modest, but comfortable. A space that felt like a fortress, secure and private. When Chad arrived with Pete, Joni Russo and Crystal Holden were already there, both women visibly tense. Joni was 32, with sharp features and exhausted eyes. Crystal, now 23, looked younger, still carrying the wounded vulnerability of someone whose trust had been shattered early. Thank you all for coming, Chad said, taking a seat across from them. I know this is difficult, but I need you to understand. I'm not here to sensationalize your pain or to exploit your stories. I'm here to stop Scott Walker permanently, and I need your help to do it. Regina said you're the husband, Joni said, her voice carrying an edge of skepticism. The latest victim's husband. Why should we trust that you won't just handle this privately and leave the rest of us exposed? Because private settlements are how he survived this long. This isn't about revenge for my marriage, though I won't lie, that's part of it. This is about making sure he never does this again. Chad opened his laptop, turning it to show them. I've spent the last 48 hours building a case. Not just evidence of affairs, but documentation of systemic coercion, abuse of power, and corporate complicity. I have Regina's evidence, HR communications, financial records showing sealed settlements, and testimony from 3 victims. If you're willing, I can make this 4. Crystal spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. What makes you think this will work? We tried. We filed complaints. We were erased. Because you were alone, isolated, forced into silence by NDAs and fear. But 4 victims, documented pattern of behavior, evidence of corporate cover-up, that's not an HR problem anymore. That's criminal investigation territory. That's a media firestorm. That's the kind of case that ends careers and brings down executives. You're talking about going public, Joni said. Strategically, yes, but not recklessly. I'm talking about coordinating with employment attorneys who specialize in workplace harassment, filing complaints with the EEOC, potentially involving state investigators, and timing the public exposure to coincide with legal action so you're protected. Regina leaned forward. Walk us through it. What exactly is the plan? Chad pulled up a detailed timeline. Phase 3 begins with legal mobilization. Tomorrow, I meet with Terry Greer, an employment attorney who specializes in hostile workplace cases and has successfully sued major corporations. She'll review all evidence and file a joint complaint with the EEOC on behalf of all victims. The complaint will include allegations of quid pro quo harassment, hostile work environment, and corporate negligence. The NDAs, Crystal started, are likely unenforceable in cases of illegal activity. Terry will argue that the NDAs were used to cover up ongoing criminal behavior, which voids them. And even if Meridian tries to enforce them, the penalties pale compared to what they'll face if this goes public without legal cover. What about Scott's wife? Joni asked. Regina mentioned you've been researching her. Martha Walker is key. Drew's surveillance shows she's active in several charitable organizations, particularly ones focused on women's empowerment. Her family's pharmaceutical company has a public ethics board. She's not just a spouse. She's a person whose reputation and values are incompatible with what her husband's been doing. Pete spoke up. We've also confirmed that Martha's family business is currently negotiating a major hospital contract. Any scandal involving family members could jeopardize it. She has strong motivation to distance herself from Scott once she knows the truth. You're going to tell her, Regina realized. At the right moment. After legal proceedings are initiated, after she's been briefed by attorneys representing the victims. She needs to understand this isn't gossip or rumor. It's documented fact, corroborated testimony, and imminent legal action. Chad's expression was intense. Martha Walker doesn't strike me as someone who'll stand by a predator when given the full truth, especially when that truth threatens her family's business. Crystal wrapped her arms around herself. What he did to me, I was an intern, 19 years old. He cornered me in his office after hours, said my performance review would reflect my willingness to be a team player. When I tried to refuse, he reminded me that I needed his recommendation for graduation credit. Without it, I wouldn't graduate on time. The room fell silent. Chad's hands clenched, but his voice remained controlled. Did you document any of it? I kept a journal. Detailed entries about every interaction, every threat, every time She couldn't finish. I was too scared to use it. Thought no one would believe me. I believe you. We all do. Chad made a note. That journal is evidence. Personal contemporaneous documentation carries significant weight in court. Joni's term was harder. I'd just gotten divorced. Single mom, desperate to keep my job. Scott presented himself as supportive, understanding. It became physical fast. Then he started making demands, availability after hours, lying to his wife about work trips that were really hotel rooms. When I tried to end it, he threatened to tell my ex-husband I was sleeping around, said he'd make sure I lost custody of my daughter. Tears formed in her eyes. I stayed for 3 more months before I couldn't take it anymore. HR gave me the same treatment as Regina, sealed settlement, NDA, erasure. And you've been living with that for 2 years, Chad said softly. Every day, wondering if I should have fought harder, reported him to police something. But I was terrified. He had all the power. Not anymore. Now we have the power of truth, documentation, and collective testimony. Chad looked at each woman. I need you to be brave one more time. Give me your evidence, your journals, your records. Trust Terry Greer to build the legal case. And when the time comes, stand together in testimony. What about your wife? Crystal asked. She's with him now, right? Doesn't she deserve to know what she's involved with? Chad's expression darkened. Christy will learn the truth. But timing matters. If I reveal everything to her now, she might warn Scott, give him time to destroy evidence or prepare a defense. She's still under his influence, still believes his lies. I need him isolated, exposed before she can interfere. That's cold, Joni observed. That's tactical. My marriage is over. I accepted that the moment I watch her bring him into our home. But I won't let sentiment compromise the operation. When Scott falls, he falls completely. Christy will have to deal with the aftermath. Regina studied him carefully. You're not doing this just for revenge, are you? There's something else. Chad was quiet for a moment. My last year in the military, I worked a case involving an officer who'd been sexually assaulting enlisted soldiers. He'd been doing it for years, using his rank to silence victims. We built the case, gathered testimony, did everything right. But the brass decided it was easier to quietly transfer him than deal with the scandal. Those victims never got justice. He never faced consequences. His eyes were hard. I won't let that happen again. Not when I have the power to stop it. The room was heavy with shared understanding. These were people who'd been failed by institutions designed to protect them. Now they were taking power back. I'm in, Regina said firmly. Me too, Joni added. Crystal nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want him to pay for what he did. To all of us. Then we moved forward together. Chad pulled out consent forms Terry had prepared. These authorized the attorney to represent you jointly, to share evidence among the group, and to coordinate legal action. Sign them, and tomorrow we file with the EEOC. Within 72 hours, Scott Walker will be under federal investigation. As each woman signed, Pete pulled Chad aside. What about the wife confrontation? When does that happen? Martha Walker gets briefed by Terry first, presented with irrefutable evidence. Then I'll meet with her personally, show her surveillance footage of Scott entering my house with Christy. She'll see him as both a cheating husband and a predator who used his position to manipulate my wife. Two betrayals at once, personal and moral. You're betting she'll turn on him. I'm betting she'll protect herself and her family's interests. Love might make her forgive infidelity. But documented predation, illegal coercion, a pattern of behavior that threatens her family's business and reputation, that she can't ignore. And when Martha confronts Scott, Chad's smile was predatory. That's when the dominoes really start falling. Scott's carefully constructed life, his marriage, his reputation, his sense of control, it all crumbles at once. And while he's dealing with that chaos, the EEOC complaint becomes public, the victims come forward, and Meridian scrambles to contain a scandal that will destroy their credibility. Complete systematic destruction. He taught his victims that power means controlling information, using fear, isolating people. I'm teaching him that real power is knowing when and how to reveal everything at once. Chad looked back at the women, signing forms that would change their lives. They deserve to see him fall. They deserve justice. And they're going to get it. Chapter 6. The Reveal. Chad sat in his living room when Christy came home Thursday evening, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. 7 p.m. She was on time for once, probably because they'd planned to have dinner together. Hey, sorry I'm late, she started, then saw his expression. What's wrong? Sit down, Christy. Something in his tone made her freeze. Chad, what's going on? I know about Scott. I've known for days. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then sank onto the chair across from him. Ow! Dean Fritz noticed your car here in the afternoons. Tuesday, I stayed home and watched you bring Scott into our house, into our bedroom. His voice was eerily calm, devoid of emotion. I heard him threaten to ruin your career if you didn't stay compliant. I heard the manipulation, the coercion. All of it. Christy's hands trembled. Chad, please, let me explain. Save it. I don't care about explanations or excuses. I care about facts. You've been having an affair with your boss for months. He's been using your career advancement as leverage. And you've been lying to me every single day. Tears streamed down her face. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It started as just attention, someone who noticed me, appreciated me. Then it became more, and by the time I realized what was happening, I was in too deep. He said he'd leave Martha, that we'd be together. He's been telling that same lie to women for years. Chad pulled out his laptop, turned it to show her Regina Raymond's testimony. Meet Regina, one of Scott's previous victims. She heard the same promises. So did Joni Russo. And Crystal Holden, who was 19 when Scott coerced her into a relationship by threatening her graduation. Christy's face went white as she read. No, Scott wouldn't. Scott did. Repeatedly. You're not special, Christy. You're not his great love. You're his latest conquest, another employee he manipulated using the power dynamic. And when he's done with you, or when you become inconvenient, he'll discard you like all the others. She looked shattered, reality crashing down. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about the others. Would it have mattered? You still made choices. You still brought him into our home, into our bed, while I was at work thinking you were the person I married. Chad stood, walked to the window. But here's what you really don't know. The women Scott victimized? They're filing a joint EEOC complaint tomorrow. Federal investigation into workplace sexual harassment and coercion. Meridian Financial is about to be caught in a massive scandal, and Scott Walker is going to be the center of it. Oh my God. And Martha Walker is being briefed by an employment attorney right now about her husband's history. She's seeing evidence of his affairs, his coercion, his pattern of predatory behavior, including surveillance footage of him entering this house with you. Christy looked like she might be sick. You're destroying him. I'm revealing him. There's a difference. Scott destroyed himself through years of abusing power. I'm just making sure everyone sees what he really is. Chad turned back to her. The question is, what are you going to do? What do you mean? You have a choice. You can stand by Scott, try to warn him, be complicit in his defense. Or you can cooperate with the investigation, provide testimony about his coercion tactics, help ensure he faces consequences. Either way, our marriage is over. But one path lets you rebuild with some integrity intact. You want me to testify against him? I want you to tell the truth about how it started, the promises he made, the ways he used your career advancement to maintain control. Because that pattern is what proves this isn't just infidelity, it's systematic abuse of power. Christy buried her face in her hands. My career is over either way. When this comes out, everyone will know that you were manipulated by a predator who had power over your professional life. The other women are stepping forward publicly. You don't have to be defined by this, Christy, but you do have to choose a side. Some choice. Destroy myself publicly or protect a man who lied to me. You'll destroy yourself more by trying to protect him. The evidence is overwhelming. Scott's going down, with or without your testimony. The question is whether you go down with him as an enabler or emerge as another victim who found the courage to speak truth. She looked up at him, mascara streaking her face. What happens to us? There is no us. Not anymore. You made sure of that when you chose him. Chad's voice finally cracked with emotion. 7 years, Christy. 7 years, I trusted you, built a life with you, believed in us. And you threw it away for a predator who was using you like a disposable asset. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase what I saw in our bedroom. Sorry is just a word you use when you get caught. He grabbed his jacket. I'm staying at Pete's. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Either call Terry Greer and schedule testimony, or don't. But understand, when this breaks, and it will break very soon, your choice will define what happens next. Where are you going? To finish what I started. Tomorrow, Martha Walker learns everything. Then the EEOC complaint goes public. Then Meridian's board gets a full briefing on their VP's criminal behavior. By Saturday, Scott Walker's entire world will have collapsed. He paused at the door. You can be part of the solution or part of his destruction. Choose wisely. He left her there, crying in the living room of the house they'd shared. There was no satisfaction in her pain, no joy in her realization. Just the cold understanding that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, some trust couldn't be rebuilt. Phase 3 was in motion. And tomorrow, Scott Walker would learn what it felt like to have everything stripped away. Martha Walker's attorney, Iris Rogers, had arranged the meeting at her downtown office. High floor, expensive view, the kind of power space that declared authority. Martha arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, elegant in a tailored suit, her expression composed but curious. Iris made introductions. Martha, this is Terry Greer, employment attorney, and Chad Herman. They have information regarding your husband that requires your immediate attention. This is about Scott? Martha's composure flickered. What's happened? Terry opened her briefcase. Mrs. Walker, what I'm about to show you is disturbing. I represent 4 women who have filed federal complaints against your husband for workplace sexual harassment and coercion. The evidence is substantial and credible. Over the next hour, they walked Martha through everything. Regina's testimony and documentation. Crystal's journal detailing coercion as an intern. Joni's account of threats related to child custody. The patterns spanning years. Sealed settlements Meridian had paid. HR communications showing corporate knowledge and cover-up. Martha's face went from disbelief to horror to cold fury. 4 women. Years of this. And the company knew. They facilitated it by silencing victims and protecting your husband's position. Terry slid another document across. And there's a current situation involving my client's wife. Chad spoke for the first time. Scott has been having an affair with my wife, Christy Herman, who works under him at Meridian. He's been using the same playbook, promises of leaving his spouse, career advancement tied to compliance, threats when she showed signs of ending it. How long? 6 months that I can document. Possibly longer. Martha's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. Show me. Chad opened his laptop, played the security footage from Tuesday. Martha watched her husband enter a stranger's home, heard his voice making promises, issuing subtle threats, the intimacy that spoke of routine rather than impulse. When it ended, Martha stood and walked to the window, her back to them. I suspected over the years. Small signs, late nights, change behavior. But I told myself I was paranoid, that he wouldn't risk our family, our life. She turned, her eyes hard. I was wrong. Mrs. Walker, you need to understand, this isn't just infidelity. Your husband has been committing federal crimes. The EEOC investigation will be public. Media will cover this extensively. Your family's business interests could be affected. The hospital contract, Martha said immediately, her business acumen kicking in. Any scandal involving ethics violations could kill the negotiation. My family's company can't be associated with this. Exactly. Which is why we wanted you informed privately before the complaint becomes public tomorrow. Martha's expression hardened into something fierce. What do you need from me? Honestly? Nothing. The case is solid without you. But if you're willing to cooperate, provide information about Scott's behavior, confirm patterns, perhaps testify about any admissions he's made, it strengthens everything. You'll have my full cooperation. And my attorneys will handle the divorce filing immediately, citing adultery and the prenuptial agreement clause. Martha looked at Chad. Your wife? Is she cooperating? She's deciding. But her testimony isn't essential. The pattern is already established with 4 victims. Christy would just be corroboration. Martha nodded slowly. I'll see that Scott is removed from our home tonight. He'll be served with divorce papers and a restraining order before the EEOC complaint drops. Whatever assets he thinks he has access to will be frozen. And I'll make sure every relevant board member at my family's company knows exactly what kind of man he is. You're not trying to protect him, Terry observed. Protect him? He's endangered everything I've built, humiliated me, committed crimes while using my family's name and connections as cover. No, Ms. Greer, I'm not protecting him. I'm excising him from my life like the cancer he is. Martha's eyes were ice. Mr. Herman, I'm sorry for what my husband did to your marriage. If there's anything I can provide to assist your situation, testimony about his patterns, financial documentation, you have it. Thank you. That's more than I expected. Don't thank me. We're both victims of the same predator. The difference is, I have resources to make sure he never recovers. She gathered her belongings. When does this become public? Tomorrow morning. EEOC complaint, victim testimony, media coverage. By noon, it'll be everywhere. Good. He deserves to watch his world burn. Martha paused at the door. Mr. Herman, one question. Did you orchestrate all of this? The legal filing, the timing, my involvement, as revenge? Chad considered. I orchestrated it as justice. Revenge would have been simpler, more violent, less permanent. This is about making sure Scott Walker never has power over anyone again. Martha smiled grimly. Then I hope you succeed completely. After she left, Iris whistled low. That is a formidable woman. Remind me never to cross her. She's protecting her interests and her family, Terry said. But she's also genuinely furious. That combination makes her a powerful ally. Chad closed his laptop. Phase 4 begins tonight. Scott gets served with divorce papers, learns his wife knows everything. Tomorrow morning, the EEOC complaint breaks. By afternoon, Meridian's board will be in crisis mode. And through it all, Scott Walker will understand exactly who caused this and why. What about you? Terry asked. When this is over, where does that leave you? Starting over. Rebuilding. But with the knowledge that I didn't let a predator continue destroying lives. Chad stood. That's enough. He left the office knowing the trap was set. Tomorrow, Scott Walker would wake up to a nightmare of his own creation. And Chad would be there to watch it all unfold. Chapter 7. The Fall. Scott Walker's Thursday began with divorce papers served at 6 a.m. by a courier who waited for his signature. The papers were comprehensive. Adultery cited with specific evidence. Prenuptial agreement invoked. Martha requesting full custody of their children and the majority of marital assets. Attached was a restraining order barring him from the family home and requiring him to maintain distance from Martha and the children. By 6:30, his phone was exploding with calls from Meridian's legal team. The EEOC complaint had been filed electronically at midnight and was now public record. Media outlets were already requesting comment on allegations of systematic sexual harassment and coercion spanning multiple years. By 7 a.m., Scott sat in his car in his own driveway, now forbidden from entering his home, trying to process the coordinated destruction of his life. By 8 a.m., he was in emergency meetings with Meridian's executive team and attorneys, denying everything while they showed him documentation he couldn't refute. For victims, corroborated testimony, HR records proving company knowledge of previous incidents. The evidence was devastating. By 9 a.m., Scott realized who had orchestrated this. The security footage included in Martha's divorce filing showed him entering a home, Chad Herman's home, with Christy. The timestamp proved it was during business hours, showed them together in ways that couldn't be misinterpreted. Chad Herman had built this case, coordinated the timing, weaponized the information. Every piece had fallen exactly when it would cause maximum damage. Scott called Christy. She didn't answer. He texted, "We need to talk. Now." Her response came 5 minutes later. "I've given testimony to the EEOC investigator. I'm cooperating with the case. Don't contact me again." Scott stared at the message, disbelief giving way to fury. Christy had turned on him. Martha had turned on him. His victims had found each other and united against him. And behind it all was Chad Herman, pulling strings like a puppet master. At 11 a.m., Meridian CEO called a board meeting. Scott was summarily suspended pending investigation. His corporate email was disabled, building access revoked, company car confiscated. He was escorted from the building by security while employees watched, whispers spreading like wildfire. By noon, his face was on news websites. Meridian Financial VP accused of serial sexual harassment. The stories included victim testimony, legal expert analysis, speculation about criminal charges. His reputation was eviscerated in real time. At 2 p.m., Scott made his mistake. He drove to Chad Herman's house. Chad was ready. He'd known Scott would come. Men like him, used to control, to power over others, couldn't accept systematic defeat without confrontation. Chad had position cameras, notified Pete to be on standby, and waited. Scott's BMW screeched into the driveway. At 2:17 p.m., he stormed out, rage evident in every movement, and pounded on the front door. Chad opened it calmly. "Scott Walker, I wondered when you'd show up. You destroyed my life." Scott's face was red, veins bulging. "My marriage, my career, my reputation. You systematically destroyed everything." "No, I revealed everything. There's a difference." Chad leaned against the doorframe, completely relaxed. "You destroyed your own life through years of predatory behavior. I just made sure everyone saw it. You manipulated my wife, turned her against me. I showed your wife evidence of your crimes. She made her own decision based on facts. Martha's smarter than you gave her credit for." Scott's hands clenched into fists. "You had no right. I had every right. You brought your affair into my home, manipulated my wife using career coercion, and thought you'd face no consequences. You were wrong. Christy wanted it. She came to me. Christy was a junior employee, and you were her superior. You used that power dynamic, made promises tied to her career advancement, and threatened her job security when she showed signs of resistance. That's not consent, Scott. That's coercion. Federal law is very clear about the difference. Scott stepped forward, threatening. Chad didn't move. You think you've won? Scott snarled. I have lawyers, connections, money. Had. Past tense. Martha froze your assets this morning per the prenup. Your lawyers dropped you an hour ago when media coverage made you toxic. Your connections at Meridian are protecting themselves by cooperating with investigators. Chad's smile was cold. You have nothing left but the consequences you earned. You smug son of a, Scott lunged. Chad was ready. His military training kicked in instantly. He sidestepped, used Scott's momentum against him, and within seconds had him face down on the porch, arm twisted behind his back in a control hold. Not enough to injure, but enough to immobilize completely. Here's what's going to happen, Chad said calmly, knee in Scott's back. You going to calm down? Get back in your car and drive away. If you ever contact me, my wife, or any of the women you victimized again, I'll have you charged with harassment, intimidation, and violation of restraining orders. Are we clear? Go to hell. Chad applied slightly more pressure to the arm hold. Not damaging, but painful. Are we clear? Yes. Scott gasped. Chad released him, stepping back smoothly. Scott scrambled to his feet, humiliated and furious. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The EEOC investigation will lead to criminal charges. Coercion, abuse of power, possibly fraud. Meridian will settle with victims to avoid prolonged litigation, and those settlements will include testimony about your behavior. Your name is permanently associated with predatory behavior. No company will hire you. No social circle will accept you. You're finished, Scott. I'll fight this. With what money? What reputation? What support system? Chad's voice was implacable. You taught your victims that power means control. I taught you that real power is understanding systems and knowing exactly where to apply pressure. You never saw this coming because you were too arrogant to imagine someone smarter and more patient than you. Scott stood there, defeated rage etched on his face. Why? Why go this far? Because men like you only stop when they're completely destroyed. Anything less, and you'd find a way to hurt someone else. Chad crossed his arms. Regina Raymond, Crystal Holden, Joni Russo, my wife, you damaged all of them. You used fear and power to make them feel helpless. I'm showing them, and others like them, that predators can be stopped. That justice is possible. You're no hero. You're just as manipulative as you claim I am. I never claimed to be a hero. I'm a man who used skills and resources to stop a predator. If that required manipulation, surveillance, and strategic information warfare, so be it. The difference is my target was someone who deserved it. Scott turned toward his car, then paused. Christy will never forgive you for this. You destroyed her career, too. Christy's career was destroyed the moment you coerced her into an affair and used her advancement as leverage. I just exposed the truth. What she does with that is her choice. Chad's expression hardened. Now get off my property. And Scott, remember this feeling, this helplessness, this loss, this understanding that your actions have consequences. Remember it every day for the rest of your life. Scott drove away, tires screeching. Chad watched until the BMW disappeared, then pulled out his phone and texted Pete. Confrontation complete. He's rattled, defeated, and knows exactly who did this. Phase 4 successful. Pete's response. Criminal charges expected to be filed next week per my contact at the DA's office. Meridian's settling with all 4 victims. Substantial amounts. Public acknowledgement of failures. You did it, brother. Chad looked at his house. The home he'd shared with Christy, now tainted by betrayal. But also the place where he'd planned and executed perfect justice. Where he'd proven that predators could be stopped by someone patient and smart enough to outmaneuver them. Tomorrow, he'd start rebuilding. Tonight, he'd acknowledge that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to be more strategic, more thorough, and more relentless than evil itself. Scott Walker had learned that lesson the hard way. Chapter 8, Aftermath. The news cycle devoured Scott Walker's fall with voracious efficiency. Within a week, the story had evolved from VP accused to mounting evidence to criminal charges filed. The district attorney announced 3 counts of coercion, workplace exploitation, and abuse of power, charges that carried significant prison time if convicted. Meridian Financial faced their own reckoning. The board launched an internal investigation that uncovered not just Scott's behavior, but systematic failures in HR, suppressed complaints, sealed settlements designed to protect executives rather than victims. The CEO resigned. The general counsel was fired. The company paid seven-figure settlements to Regina, Crystal, Joni, and two other victims who came forward after the initial complaint became public. Martha Walker moved with surgical precision. The divorce was finalized in record time, thanks to the adultery clause and Scott's inability to contest given the criminal proceedings. She retained the house, custody of the children, and the majority of assets. Scott was left with legal debt and a destroyed reputation. But the most satisfying moment for Chad came 2 weeks after the confrontation, when he received a call from Regina Raymond. "Chad, I wanted to thank you. All of us do. You don't need to thank me. You had the courage to come forward. After years of silence, of thinking we were alone and powerless, you showed us we weren't. More than that, you showed us that predators can be stopped, that justice is possible even when systems fail." Her voice caught. "My career is back on track. Crystal's back in school, free from the trauma that was holding her back. Joni's daughter will grow up knowing her mother fought back. That matters. What you all did, standing together, telling your truth, that's what stopped him. I just coordinated the timing." Regina laughed softly. "You did a lot more than coordinate, and we know it. But I'll let you maintain that fiction if it helps you sleep at night. Just know, you change lives. Save future victims. That's worth something." After the call ended, Chad sat in his new apartment. A downtown loft, fresh start, no memories of betrayal. The divorce from Christy was proceeding smoothly. She'd given her testimony, cooperated with investigators, and was slowly rebuilding her career at a different firm. They'd spoken once since everything broke, a conversation that brought closure, if not forgiveness. "I was a victim too," she'd said quietly, "but I also made choices. I betrayed you, lied to you, brought him into our home. The fact that Scott manipulated me doesn't erase my responsibility. No, it doesn't. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, watching you dismantle him, seeing the way you protected those women, it showed me the kind of person you really are. Strong, strategic, but also principled. I'm sorry I threw that away. We both lost something," Chad had replied. "The difference is, I'll recover. You'll have to live with your choices." Now, looking out over the city lights, Chad reflected on the entire operation. From Dean Fritz's warning to Scott's humiliation on his porch, every move had been calculated, timed, executed with precision. He'd used skills learned in military intelligence, applied them to civilian justice, and achieved complete victory. But it wasn't satisfaction he felt. It was something quieter, the understanding that he'd done what was necessary, that he'd protected future victims, that he'd proven predators weren't invincible. His phone rang. "Pete Gaines. You watching the news?" "Should I be?" "Scott Walker's pleading guilty. His lawyers cut a deal. 3 years in prison, 5 years probation, registry as a sex offender, mandatory counseling. He's done fighting." Chad absorbed the news. 3 years seemed light, but the sex offender registry was lifetime. The probation restrictions meant supervised employment, limited contact with others, permanent stain on his record. Scott Walker would spend the rest of his life defined by his crimes. "He's finished," Chad said. "Completely. Hey, how are you holding up? This whole thing, your marriage, the investigation, confronting him, that's a lot to process." "I'm good. Better than good, actually. For the first time in months, I feel clear. Like I did something that mattered." "You did. Those women have their lives back. Scott's behind bars. The company's implementing real reforms. That's impact, brother." After they hung up, Chad opened his laptop and deleted the encrypted folder labeled Project Accountability. The evidence had served its purpose. The operation was complete. But before closing the laptop, he drafted one final message. An email to Dean Fritz, his neighbor who'd started everything with a simple observation. "Dean, wanted to thank you for your honesty weeks ago. Your warning set in motion events that stopped a predator and protected future victims. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage, speaking up when something seems wrong, have the biggest impact. Thank you for caring enough to say something. Chad. He hit send, then stood and walked to the window. The city sprawled below, millions of lives intersecting, each with their own struggles and victories. Chad Herman had entered this battle as a betrayed husband seeking revenge. He emerged as someone who'd learned that true victory wasn't destruction. It was using power responsibly, protecting the vulnerable, ensuring justice when systems failed. Scott Walker had been a predator who thought his position made him untouchable. He learned otherwise. And Chad had learned that the skills that made him dangerous, strategic thinking, patience, ability to coordinate complex operations, could be used for good. Tomorrow, he'd wake up in his new apartment, go to work, continue rebuilding. But tonight, he'd acknowledge that sometimes the world needed people willing to fight, to plan, to execute justice when no one else would. Scott Walker was finished, and Chad Herman had proven that intelligence, patience, and absolute commitment to justice could defeat even the most entrenched predators. Chapter 9, Resolution. 6 months after Scott Walker's guilty plea, Chad Herman found himself in an unexpected place. A small auditorium where Terry Greer was giving a presentation on workplace harassment law to HR professionals. She'd invited him to attend, saying his perspective might be valuable. What he didn't expect was being called to the stage. I want to introduce someone who played a crucial role in the Walker case, Terry said, gesturing to Chad. Not a lawyer, not law enforcement, but a victim's spouse who understood that stopping predators requires strategic thinking, patience, and absolute commitment to justice. Chad walked up reluctantly, uncomfortable with the attention. The audience, mostly HR professionals and corporate attorneys, looked at him with curiosity. I'm not a hero, Chad began. I'm someone who used skills from my military intelligence background to stop a man who was destroying lives. But the real heroes are the women who came forward. Regina Raymond, Crystal Holden, Joni Russo, and yes, even my ex-wife Christy. They found courage when systems had failed them. An audience member raised her hand. What would you say to other companies dealing with similar situations? Stop protecting predators. The NDAs, the sealed settlements, the quiet transfers, they don't solve problems. They just give predators new hunting grounds. When someone reports harassment, investigate thoroughly, believe victims, and act decisively. Because if you don't, someone like me will, and the results will be much worse for everyone involved. Another question, do you regret how far you took it? The public exposure, the systematic destruction of his life. Chad considered carefully. I regret that it was necessary. But Scott Walker had years to stop, multiple chances to face consequences, and chose to continue victimizing people. Partial measures wouldn't have stopped him. He needed to be completely removed from positions of power. Do I regret ensuring he can never hurt anyone again? No. After the presentation, Regina, Crystal, and Joni approached him in the lobby. We've started a support network, Regina explained, for victims of workplace coercion and harassment. Sharing resources, legal contacts, therapeutic support. We're using what happened to help others. That's incredible. It was your example, Crystal said. You showed us that fighting back is possible, that predators can be stopped. Now, we're paying that forward. Joni added, we wanted you to know, Scott's case set precedent. 2 other major companies have been investigated using similar frameworks. Victims are coming forward because they saw justice was possible. Chad felt something shift. The cold, tactical approach he'd maintained throughout the operation warming into something more human. You all did that. I just helped coordinate. You did more than coordinate, Regina insisted. You taught us that intelligence, planning, and strategic action can overcome institutional power. That matters. As they left, Chad stood alone in the lobby, reflecting on the journey. From a morning, Dean Fritz warned him to this moment. He'd transformed from a betrayed husband into someone who'd executed perfect justice. His phone buzzed. A text from Martha Walker. They'd stayed in occasional contact, united by shared experience. Heard you spoke at Terry's seminar. The kids are doing well, adjusting. I've started consulting with companies on executive accountability. Turns out nearly destroying a predator gives you credibility in reform circles. Thank you again for revealing the truth. Chad smiled, responding, "You protected your children and held them accountable. That took strength. Glad you're all moving forward." He walked outside into afternoon sunshine. His life was different now. New apartment, new routines, new understanding of his own capabilities. The betrayal still stung sometimes, but it no longer defined him. What defined him was the knowledge that he'd used skills meant for war to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That he'd taken the pain of betrayal and channeled it into systematic justice. That he'd proven predators weren't untouchable. They just hadn't met someone patient and smart enough to outmaneuver them. His phone rang. Pete Gaines. "Hey, brother. Got a consulting offer from a security firm. They want someone with strategic planning skills, experience in complex operations. Thought of you immediately. I'm not looking to change jobs. It's not full-time. Contract work, helping companies improve security infrastructure, identifying vulnerabilities. Your analytical mind, your ability to see patterns, it's valuable." Chad considered. "Send me the details." After hanging up, he walked toward his car, mind already analyzing the opportunity. Using his skills constructively, helping prevent problems rather than just solving them after the fact. Scott Walker was in prison, serving his sentence. His name was synonymous with predatory behavior. His victims had found justice, support, and the courage to help others. And Chad Herman had learned that sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was justice so complete, so thorough, that the predator's very name became a warning to others. He drove home as the sun set, the city transforming in golden light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But tonight, he'd rest knowing he'd done something that mattered. In his apartment, Chad opened his laptop one final time and wrote a single document. Not for anyone else, just for himself. A record of lessons learned. Victory isn't about destruction. It's about protection. Justice requires patience, planning, and perfect execution. Predators thrive in silence. Exposure is the ultimate weapon. Trust is earned through actions, not words. Sometimes the skills that make you dangerous are exactly what the world needs. He saved the document, closed the laptop, and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were being victimized, manipulated, coerced by those with power. Somewhere, systems were failing to protect the vulnerable. But also somewhere, people were finding courage to speak up, to fight back, to demand justice. Chad Herman had proven it was possible, and that knowledge, that predators could be stopped, that justice could prevail, that one person with skills and determination could change everything. That was worth all the pain, all the planning, all the cold, calculated steps he'd taken. Scott Walker would spend years remembering the husband who dismantled his life with precision and patience. And Chad Herman would spend years knowing he'd used his darkest moment to create something meaningful. Justice for the vulnerable, consequences for the predator, and proof that evil only wins when good people stay silent. He'd chosen to speak through action, and in doing so, he'd won completely. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. My 8-year-old son said from his hospital bed, "Dad, I'm going to heaven soon." Holding back tears. "I can't protect you anymore. So please, run away." When I asked why, he replied, "Look in my school locker. You'll understand why." When I checked his locker, I called the cops, but they refused to help me because... Before we continue, subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab channel and let US know where you're listening from in comments. My name is Cody Gross, and I thought I knew what hell looked like until I sat beside my 8-year-old son Danny's hospital bed, watching the machines keep him alive. The doctor said it was acute liver failure, sudden, severe, and with no clear cause. Danny had always been healthy, energetic, the kind of kid who could eat dirt and bounce back stronger than ever. But now he looked so small against those white sheets, tubes running in and out of his tiny body like he was some kind of broken machine they were trying to fix. "Dad," Danny whispered, his voice barely audible over the steady beep of the monitors. His eyes, once bright blue like his mother's, now held a weight no child should ever carry. "I'm going to heaven soon." I gripped the metal rail of his bed until my knuckles went white. "Don't say that, buddy. You're going to be fine. The doctors are working on." "No, Dad." He reached out with his small hand, the one without the four, and touched my arm. His skin felt paper-thin and cold. "I can't protect you anymore, so please run away." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Protect me? My 8-year-old son thought he was protecting me? From what? "Danny, what are you talking about? Protect me from what?" Tears started rolling down his pale cheeks. "I'm sorry, Dad. I try to keep you safe, but I'm too tired now. I can't eat your food anymore. I can't drink your coffee." He was getting agitated, the heart monitor speeding up. "Look at my school locker. Combination is 0418, your birthday. You'll understand why." A nurse rushed in, alerted by the machines. "Sir, I need you to step back. His vitals are spiking." I was pushed aside as medical staff swarmed around my son. Through the chaos, I heard Danny's weak voice one more time. "Locker 247. Be careful, Dad. They're watching." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the hospital corridor, replaying Danny's words over and over. "You've been eating my food? Drinking my coffee? Why would he say that? And what did he mean they were watching?" My wife Brittany had gone home around midnight, claiming she needed rest. She'd been strangely calm throughout this whole ordeal, almost detached. When the doctors first told us about Danny's condition, she didn't break down like I did. She just nodded, asked a few clinical questions, and started making phone calls to handle the situation. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. Danny's elementary school was only 20 minutes away. Security was minimal, a few cameras and a night watchman who spent most of his time sleeping in the main office. I'd helped with enough school events to know the building's layout like the back of my hand. The custodial entrance was my way in. I noticed during a parent-teacher conference that the lock was loose, probably hadn't been properly fixed in years. A few minutes with a credit card, and I was inside the empty hallways. Lincoln Elementary after dark was eerily quiet, my footsteps echoing off the polished floors. I made my way to the 5th grade wing, where Danny's locker sat among dozens of others, each decorated with stickers and photos that spoke of childhood innocence. Locker 247. The combination lock felt cold under my fingers as I entered 0418, April 18th, my birthday. How did Danny know my birthday when Brittany barely remembered it anymore? The lock clicked open. Inside, instead of the usual collection of school supplies and forgotten lunch containers, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a small digital camera, the kind kids weren't supposed to have at school. Beneath, it was a manila envelope thick with photographs and a notebook filled with Danny's careful, 8-year-old handwriting. I grabbed everything and headed to my truck, my hands shaking so badly I could barely start the engine. Back in the hospital parking lot, under the harsh glow of a streetlight, I opened Danny's notebook with trembling hands. The first page made me want to vomit. Daddy Protection Journal. Day 23. Mom put the white powder in Daddy's coffee again this morning. I poured it out when she wasn't looking and made new coffee. She got mad and asked why Daddy's coffee was cold. I said I accidentally knocked it over. She made new coffee with more white powder. I drank half of it when Daddy wasn't looking. It tasted really bitter and made my tummy hurt, but Daddy can't get sick. I flipped through page after page of entries dating back 3 months. Danny had been systematically intercepting poisoned food and drinks meant for me, consuming them himself to keep me safe. My 8-year-old son had been slowly killing himself to protect me. The photographs were worse. Danny had been secretly documenting everything with the camera he'd somehow acquired. There were images of Brittany mixing white powder into my morning coffee. Pictures of her injecting something into my lunch sandwiches with a syringe. Photos of her adding drops from a small vial into my beer bottles. But the most damning evidence was in the final set of photographs. Brittany wasn't working alone. The images showed my wife in the kitchen with Wilson Morrison, my best friend since college, my business partner, the man I trusted with my life and my family. He was handing her small packages, instructing her on dosages, even helping her prepare the poison meals. One photo showed them kissing passionately over my contaminated coffee pot. The final entry in Danny's journal, dated just 2 days ago, broke what was left of my heart. Day 89, I'm really sick now. My pee is dark and my skin looks yellow. Daddy notices I don't eat much anymore, but I can't tell him why. I heard Mom and Uncle Wilson talking about how the poison should have worked by now. They don't know I've been taking it instead. Tomorrow they're going to use more. I don't think I can drink anymore, but I have to try. I love you, Daddy. I hope you never have to read this. I sat in my truck, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child myself. My son was dying because my wife and best friend had been trying to murder me. For 3 months, Danny had been my unwitting guardian angel, sacrificing his own life to save mine. With shaking hands, I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an attempted murder and child endangerment. My wife and her accomplice have been poisoning me, and my son intercepted the poison and is now dying in the hospital. Sir, I'm going to transfer you to Detective Wilson Morrison. He handles all poison-related cases in this jurisdiction. My blood turned to ice. Wait, did you say Wilson Morrison? Yes, sir, Detective Morrison. He's our specialist in these types of cases. Please hold. The line went quiet. Then I heard that familiar voice. The voice of the man who'd been my best man at my wedding, who'd held Danny when he was born, who'd been systematically trying to kill me while sleeping with my wife. Cody? That you, buddy? Wilson's voice was perfectly calm, almost amused. I heard you've got some concerns about poisoning. That's a pretty serious accusation. You bastard, I whispered into the phone. I know everything. I have evidence. Photos, journals, everything. Wilson chuckled. Evidence? What evidence? Sounds like you're having some kind of breakdown, friend. The stress of your son's illness is probably getting to you. Sometimes grieving parents imagine all sorts of conspiracies when they can't accept the reality of a sick child. Danny has been drinking the poison meant for me. He documented everything. An 8-year-old's fantasy notebook isn't evidence, Cody. And even if it were, well, I'm the lead detective on poison cases. Any evidence would have to go through me first. Shame if it got lost or contaminated, don't you think? The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Wilson wasn't just my best friend and business partner. He was a decorated police detective with 20 years on the force. He had connections, influence, and the power to make evidence disappear. Even if I took this to the FBI or state police, it would be my word against a respected cop with an impeccable record. Here's what's going to happen, Cody. Wilson continued, his voice turning cold. You're going to accept that your son has some rare illness. You're going to grieve properly. And if you try to cause problems for me or Brittany, well, grief-stricken fathers sometimes do terrible things. Suicide, maybe, or a tragic accident. The stress of losing a child can make a man do unpredictable things. He hung up. I sat in that parking lot for an hour, rage building inside me like molten lava. The system I trusted, the law I believed in, the people I'd loved, they'd all betrayed me. My son was dying because of their greed and lust, and they thought they could just walk away from it. They were wrong. I spent the next day researching everything I could about Wilson Morrison and trying to piece together the full scope of their plan. What I discovered made me realize this conspiracy went deeper than simple murder for insurance money. Wilson had been systematically using his position as a detective to eliminate people who threatened his side businesses. Over the past 5 years, there have been 17 accidental deaths and suicides in our city involving people who'd been investigating financial irregularities or asking too many questions about certain police cases. Wilson wasn't just corrupt. He was a serial killer with a badge. My death was supposed to look like a heart attack brought on by stress. The slow poisoning would mimic the symptoms of cardiovascular disease, especially since I'd been working long hours at the construction company Wilson and I had built together. After my death, Brittany would inherit my half of the business and my life insurance. Nearly $3 million total. But there was more. Brittany had been feeding Wilson information about our clients, particularly those involved in government contracts. Wilson had been using police resources to investigate these clients, gathering blackmail material and inside information that he then sold to competing firms. I was just collateral damage in a much larger operation. The more I learned, the angrier I became. But anger wasn't enough. Danny was still dying, and even if I could somehow expose Wilson and Brittany, the damage was done. The poison had destroyed my son's liver, and the doctors said his chances were slim even with a transplant. I needed more than justice. I needed revenge. That evening, I returned to the hospital to sit with Danny. He was unconscious now, the machines doing most of the work of keeping him alive. Brittany was there, playing the role of grieving mother perfectly. She even managed to produce tears on command. "Oh, Cody," she said, rushing to embrace me. "The doctors said we should start thinking about end-of-life decisions." I held her close, smelling the perfume that Wilson had bought her. I'd seen the receipt in his wallet when he'd paid for dinner last month. "I'm not giving up on him yet. But honey, we have to be realistic. Danny's suffering. Maybe it would be more merciful to what? Kill him." I pulled back to look at her face. She was still beautiful. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of woman who could make men do stupid things. I've been one of those stupid men once. "Is that what you want, Brittany? For Danny to die?" Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? Of course not. I just meant that sometimes the kindest thing is to let go. Like you let go of our marriage. She stepped back, her expression changing to one of confusion mixed with alarm. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," I said, sitting down beside Danny's bed. "I'm just tired. Why don't you go home and rest? I'll stay with him tonight." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Give Wilson my regards when you see him." The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "Wilson? Why would I see Wilson?" "I don't know. You two seem close lately." "Very close." She kissed my forehead, the kiss of Judas. "You're stressed, honey. Try to get some sleep." After she left, I sat with Danny through the night, holding his small hand and making him a promise. "I'm going to make them pay, son. I'm going to make them all pay for what they did to you." To understand how to destroy Wilson Morrison and Brittany, I needed to understand who they really were. I'd known Wilson for 15 years, but apparently, I'd never known him at all. I started with the public records. Wilson had joined the police force straight out of college, quickly rising through the ranks with a combination of natural talent and ruthless ambition. He'd been married twice. Both wives had died in accidents. The first had fallen down the stairs and broken her neck. The second had overdosed on prescription medication. Interesting pattern. Digging deeper into old newspaper archives, I found articles about both deaths. In each case, Wilson had been the grieving widower, collecting substantial life insurance payouts. In each case, he'd remarried within a year. Women who were wealthy, beautiful, and tragically short-lived. Brittany was supposed to be wife number 3, once I was out of the picture. But Wilson's history of murdering wives wasn't his only secret. Using my connections in the construction industry, I started investigating the buildings and properties connected to Wilson's side business. What I found was a network of safe houses, money laundering operations, and drug distribution centers that stretched across 3 states. Wilson Morrison wasn't just a corrupt cop killing inconvenient people. He was the head of a criminal organization that used police resources to eliminate competition and protect their operations. My wife had fallen in love with a monster. Learning about Brittany's background was equally revealing. She hadn't grown up poor like she'd always claimed. Her family, the Alexanders, were old money from Connecticut, wealth built on shipping and imports during the early 20th century. But that wealth had come with a dark legacy. Brittany's great-grandfather had been a bootlegger during Prohibition. Her grandfather had been involved with organized crime, and her father had died in federal prison on racketeering charges when she was 16. She'd been raised by her mother, who'd taught her that marriage was a business transaction and love was a weakness to be exploited. Brittany hadn't married me for love. She'd married me because I was successful, trustworthy, and, most importantly, gullible enough to give her access to my money and business connections. Meeting Wilson had been the final piece of her plan. He had the skills and resources to eliminate me, while she provided the inside access and motive. Together, they'd been planning the perfect crime. Except they hadn't counted on Danny. As I sat in the hospital that 4th night, watching my son fight for his life, I realized that Wilson and Brittany had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the love between a father and son. Danny's sacrifice had not only saved my life, it had given me the evidence and motivation I needed to destroy them both. But I wasn't going to rely on the legal system. Wilson controlled too much of the local law enforcement, and Brittany's family still had connections that could make evidence disappear or witnesses change their minds. I was going to handle this myself, and I was going to make sure they suffered before they died. Planning the perfect revenge required patience, resources, and a complete willingness to cross lines I'd never imagined crossing. Fortunately, 15 years in the construction business had taught me about explosives, heavy machinery, and how to make problems disappear permanently. More importantly, it had taught me about the kind of men who could help with problems that required extreme solutions. Rafael Andrade had worked for me for 3 years before I learned about his past. He'd been a combat engineer in the Army, specializing in demolitions and urban pacification, a polite term for making buildings and the people inside them cease to exist. After his discharge, he'd worked as a freelance problem solver for people who needed things done quietly and efficiently. I found Rafael at his apartment on the east side of town, a sparse place that looked more like a military barracks than a home. When I explained what I needed, he listened without expression, occasionally nodding or asking technical questions. "This Wilson," Rafael said when I finished, "he's expecting you to come at him directly. Grieving father, righteous anger, probably thinks you'll try to shoot him or run him down with a truck. Probably. So we don't do that. We make him come to us on our terms, in a place where his badge and his connections don't matter." Rafael's plan was elegantly simple. Wilson's criminal organization depended on a network of safe houses and distribution points. If those locations were compromised or destroyed, Wilson would be forced to consolidate his operations into a single, defensible position, an abandoned warehouse complex on the outskirts of town that he'd been using as his primary base. More importantly, if his business partners thought Wilson was losing control, they'd demand a face-to-face meeting to discuss restructuring their arrangement. Criminal organizations didn't tolerate weakness or failure. "We hit his operations systematically," Rafael explained, showing me blueprints of the warehouse complex. "Make it look like a rival gang moving in on his territory. He'll have to respond, and when he does, we'll be waiting." "What about Brittany?" Rafael smiled, a cold expression that made me understand why enemies of the United States had learned to fear men like him. "She'll come to him. Women like that always run to the strongest predator when they're scared. She'll think Wilson can protect her. And Danny, your son's a fighter. Keep him alive long enough for us to finish this, and maybe the satisfaction of knowing his sacrifice meant something will help him pull through." Over the next week, we put our plan into motion. Rafael had contacts in the criminal underworld, men who were happy to cause problems for corrupt cops in exchange for cash and the promise of reduced competition. The first target was a meth lab Wilson operated in an abandoned gas station. The explosion was visible from miles away and made the evening news as a gas leak accident. The second was a money laundering operation disguised as a used car lot. That fire burned for 6 hours and destroyed over $1 million in illegal proceeds. By the third operation, a drug distribution center in a converted restaurant, Wilson knew he was under attack. The beauty of Rafael's plan was that all the evidence pointed to a gang war between rival criminal organizations. Wilson couldn't call for police backup without exposing his own illegal activities. He was on his own, exactly where we wanted him. Wilson Morrison was many things: murderer, criminal, corrupt cop. But he wasn't stupid. After losing 3 major operations in 5 days, he knew someone was systematically dismantling his empire. What he didn't know was who or why. I'd been careful to maintain my routine during this period. I visited Danny at the hospital every day, played the grieving father perfectly, and even had dinner with Brittany twice. Meals where I pretended to eat food that she'd probably poisoned while secretly disposing of it when she wasn't looking. "You seem better," she said on Friday night, as we sat in our dining room pretending to be a normal married couple. "More optimistic about Danny. The doctors say there might be some improvement in his liver function." Small changes, but positive ones. That was true. Since I'd stopped consuming the poison meant for me, and Danny was no longer intercepting it, the toxins in his system were gradually being processed out. He was still critical, but no longer deteriorating. Brittany's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That's wonderful news. Maybe we should celebrate. She reached for a bottle of wine. Expensive stuff that I was sure had been doctored with something lethal. I think I'll stick to water tonight. My stomach's been upset. Are you sure? This is a special bottle. Wilson brought it over yesterday. Of course he had. Wilson was here yesterday, just for a few minutes. He wanted to check on how we were handling everything with Danny. He's such a good friend. Yes, he is. What did you two talk? In the kitchen, mostly. What? No reason. I'm just glad he's looking out for us. That night, after Brittany went to bed, I searched the kitchen and found 3 new vials of poison hidden behind the flour canister, enough to kill a dozen men. Wilson was getting desperate and increasing the dosage. It was time to spring the trap. I called Wilson's cell phone at 2 a.m., knowing he'd be awake and paranoid after losing another operation that evening. Cody? What's wrong? Is it Danny? Wilson, I need your help. Someone broke into the house tonight while Brittany and I were at the hospital. They didn't take anything, but they left a message. What kind of message? It's written on the wall in the kitchen. It says, "We know about the warehouse. You have 48 hours. Wilson, what warehouse? What does this mean? The silence on the other end lasted nearly 30 seconds. I'll be right over. Should I call the regular police? No. His response was too quick, too sharp. No, this sounds like it might be related to some cases I'm working on. Don't call anyone else until I get there. Okay, but Wilson, I'm scared. If someone's targeting us because of your police work, they're not targeting you, Cody. This is about me. Pack a bag for you and Brittany. I'm going to take you somewhere safe until this blows over. What about Danny? I can't leave Danny. The hospital is the safest place for him right now. These people won't hurt a sick child. He was right about that. They wouldn't hurt Danny because they were Danny's father and his father's friends. But Wilson didn't know that I knew. Okay, I said. How long should we pack for? A few days, maybe a week. And Cody, don't tell anyone where you're going. Not your family, not your employees, not anyone. These are dangerous people. After he hung up, I called Raphael. He took the bait. He's coming to collect us now. Probably taking us to the warehouse. Perfect. We'll be ready. I went upstairs and woke Brittany, telling her about the break-in and Wilson's plan to take us somewhere safe. She played her part perfectly. Concerned wife, grateful for Wilson's protection, frightened by the mysterious threat. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have actually felt sorry for her. Wilson arrived within 20 minutes, armed and wearing tactical gear under his jacket. He surveyed the fake message Raphael and I had painted on the kitchen wall, nodding grimly. This is worse than I thought, he said. These people are professionals. We need to get you out of here now. Who are they? Brittany asked, clinging to his arm. What warehouse are they talking about? It's complicated. Let's just say I've made some enemies in my line of work. The important thing is keeping you two safe. We drove through the night to Wilson's warehouse complex, exactly as Raphael had predicted. The building was a fortress surrounded by high fences and equipped with security cameras and motion sensors. Wilson had prepared this place to withstand a siege. Too bad he'd invited the enemy inside. The warehouse complex was larger than I'd expected. 3 connected buildings spread across 5 acres of industrial wasteland. Wilson had turned it into his personal kingdom, complete with living quarters, offices, and storage areas for his various criminal enterprises. You'll be safe here, he assured us as we entered through a reinforced steel door. This place is off the grid. No one can find you here. Brittany looked around with obvious familiarity. This wasn't her first visit to Wilson's stronghold. She moved through the corridors like she knew exactly where everything was located. How long do we have to stay here? I asked, playing the role of concerned husband. Until I can neutralize the threat, Wilson replied. A few days, maybe longer. I've got enough supplies to last a month if necessary. He showed us to a living area that had been set up like a luxury apartment. Kitchen, bedrooms, entertainment center. It would have been comfortable if it weren't a prison. I need to make some calls, Wilson said. There are people I have to contact about this situation. Make yourselves at home. As soon as he left, Brittany dropped her act. "This is perfect," she said, settling onto the couch with obvious relief. "Once Wilson eliminates whoever's been causing problems, we can move forward with our plans." "What plans?" She looked at me with genuine surprise. "Our plans, honey, for after Danny." She couldn't quite bring herself to say it. "After things settled down, Wilson and I thought we might go away for a while. Maybe Europe. You should come with us." "That sounds nice," I said, sitting beside her. "The three of us together." "Exactly. Like a family." I reached over and stroked her hair, soft, blonde, and paid for with money I'd earned while she was planning my murder. "Brittany, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you love me?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Then she smiled and leaned against me. "Of course I love you, Cody. You're my husband. But do you love Wilson too?" This time she didn't recover as quickly. Wilson is helping us through a difficult time. By sleeping with you?" She went rigid against me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you and Wilson planning to kill me so you could be together. I'm talking about Danny intercepting the poison you meant for me and slowly dying because of it. I'm talking about 3 months of watching my son sacrifice his life to save mine." Brittany tried to pull away, but I held her tightly, not enough to hurt her, but enough to keep her from running. "I don't know what you think you. I know everything, Brittany. I have photographs, journals, evidence of everything you and Wilson have been doing. The only reason I'm here is to make sure you both pay for what you did to Danny." She stopped struggling and looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion. "If you know, then why did you come here? Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because Wilson is the police. Because the system failed me and my son. Because sometimes a man has to handle things himself." That's when Wilson walked back into the room, and I realized he'd been listening from the doorway. Well, he said, drawing his service weapon. "Cody Gross, the grieving father who's too smart for his own good." Wilson kept his gun trained on me while Brittany scrambled to the other side of the room. The mask of friendship was completely gone now, replaced by the cold expression of a predator who'd been cornered. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Danny figured it out first. He's been protecting me for months, eating and drinking the poison you two meant for me." Brittany made a sound like a wounded animal. "The poison was never supposed to hurt Danny. It was just meant for her." "Shut up," Wilson snapped. "It doesn't matter now. The kid's going to die anyway, and so is Cody." "What about our plans?" Brittany asked. "What about Europe?" Wilson laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the warehouse walls. "Plans? You think I was actually going to run away with you? You were useful, Brittany, but you were never the end game. After Cody died, I would have given you a few months to grieve. Then you'd have had an unfortunate accident, just like my first 2 wives." The realization hit Brittany like a slap. "You killed them too." "Of course I killed them. Just like I've killed 17 other people who got in my way. Just like I'm going to kill both of you." That's when the lights went out. The warehouse was plunged into absolute darkness, and Wilson's carefully controlled environment became a battlefield where his advantages meant nothing. I heard him curse and move toward where he thought I'd been sitting, but Raphael and I had planned for this moment. While Wilson and Brittany had been talking, I'd been slowly moving toward a hidden panel where Raphael had concealed night vision equipment and weapons. As soon as the power cut, triggered by Raphael from outside, I rolled behind cover and activated the night vision goggles. Wilson was stumbling around in the dark, trying to use his police training to clear the room systematically. Brittany was pressed against the far wall, crying and calling his name. "Wilson," she sobbed. "What's happening?" "Someone cut the power," he replied, his voice professionally calm despite the circumstances. "Stay where you are. Don't move." I could see him clearly through the night vision, a green-tinted figure moving cautiously through the darkness, sweeping his weapon back and forth. He was good, but he was also predictable. Police training emphasized control and procedure, but this wasn't a normal law enforcement situation. This was personal. I picked up a wrench from Raphael's toolkit and threw it across the room. Wilson spun toward the sound, firing twice. The muzzle flashes destroyed his night vision temporarily, and I used that moment to move closer. "You know what your problem is, Wilson?" I called out from the darkness. You always underestimated the people you were trying to kill. Show yourself, Cody. Let's end this like men. Like you ended it with your wives? Like you were going to end it with me? No thanks. I threw another tool in a different direction. Wilson fired again, but his shots were wild now. He was losing control, letting fear override his training. Your son is going to die, he said. Try to regain psychological control. Even if you kill me, Danny is still going to die. The damage is done. Maybe, but at least he'll know his father made you pay for what you did. I circled around behind him while he was focused on the wrong area. Wilson Morrison, decorated police detective, serial killer, destroyer of families, never saw me coming. When I hit him with the tire iron, he went down hard. Wilson wasn't dead, but he wasn't getting up anytime soon. I zip-tied his hands and feet while he was unconscious, then turned my attention to Brittany. She was still cowering against the wall, no longer the confident woman who'd been planning my death. In the green glow of the night vision, she looked small and pathetic. "Please don't kill me," she whispered. "I'll disappear. I'll never bother you again. I'll confess to everything. Will you bring Danny back to health? Will you give him back the months he spent slowly dying to protect me? I didn't know he was taking the poison. I swear I didn't know. But you knew you were putting poison in my food. You knew you were trying to murder your husband, the father of your child." Raphael's voice came through the small radio I'd been carrying. "Cody, we've got company. Wilson's partners are here. 3 cars, maybe 8 men. They're surrounding the building. Perfect timing. Wilson's criminal associates had come for their meeting, probably expecting to find their leader in control of the situation. Instead, they were walking into a trap. I dragged Wilson to a chair and slapped him awake. His eyes were unfocused, but he was conscious enough to understand what was happening. "Your friends are here," I told him. "The ones you've been stealing from, lying to, putting at risk with your sloppy operation. What do you think they'll do when they find out you've been compromised?" Wilson's face went pale. Criminal organizations had simple solutions for members who became liabilities. "You can't do this. I'm a police officer. You're a murderer who hides behind a badge. Your own partners are going to execute you, and I'm going to watch." The sound of gunfire erupted outside as Raphael and his associates engaged Wilson's crew. It was a brief, violent exchange that ended with silence. Raphael had chosen his allies well, former military contractors who specialized in this kind of work. When the shooting stopped, Raphael's voice came through the radio again. "All clear. Wilson's people won't be bothering anyone anymore." I looked at Brittany, who was staring at me with absolute terror. "You want to live?" She nodded frantically. "Then you're going to help me save Danny. Wilson has connections with doctors who don't ask questions about how their patient got sick. You're going to use those connections to get Danny the treatment he needs, and you're going to pay for it with every penny of the money you stole from me." "What about Wilson?" I glanced at my former best friend, who was slumped in the chair with blood running down his face. "Wilson is going to disappear. Corrupt cops who get exposed have a habit of running away to countries without extradition treaties. At least, that's what the official report will say." Raphael entered the warehouse with 2 of his associates. They moved with military precision, securing the area and checking for additional threats. "What's the plan for him?" Raphael asked, nodding toward Wilson. "Make it look like he fled the country. Clean out his bank accounts. Create a paper trail showing he bought a plane ticket to somewhere without extradition. Leave his car at the airport." And the reality? I looked at Wilson, who was trying to focus on our conversation through his concussion. The reality is that he's going to spend the rest of his life in a very uncomfortable place, thinking about what he did to my son. Raphael nodded. He understood the kind of justice that couldn't be found in courtrooms. 3 months later, Danny came home from the hospital on a Tuesday morning in spring. The experimental treatment had worked. His liver function was returning to normal, and the doctors said he'd make a full recovery. Brittany had kept her end of the bargain. She'd used Wilson's medical connections to get Danny the best possible care, paying for everything with money from Wilson's hidden accounts. After that, she disappeared, probably somewhere in South America where her family's old connections could keep her safe. I didn't care where she went as long as she stayed gone. The official story was that Detective Wilson Morrison had been discovered to be involved with criminal organizations and had fled the country when an investigation got too close. His abandoned car was found at the airport, and airline records showed he'd bought a ticket to Brazil. No one looked too hard for him after that. Corrupt cops who ran away weren't worth the resources it would take to bring them back. Danny never asked what happened to his mother or Uncle Wilson. He was smart enough to understand that some questions were better left unasked. Instead, he focused on getting better, on going back to school, on being a normal 8-year-old boy. Sometimes, late at night, he'd ask me about the journal he'd kept. "Dad, do you think I did the right thing? Protecting you like that. You saved my life, son. You saved both our lives. But I got really sick." "Yes, you did. But you also show me how strong you are, how much you love me. And that gave me the strength to protect both of us." He'd nod and go back to sleep, satisfied with that answer. I never told him the details of what happened to Wilson and Brittany. He didn't need to carry that weight. It was enough that justice had been served, even if that justice came from outside the system that had failed us. Some people might say I went too far, that I should have found another way. But those people never had to watch their child dying, because the people they trusted most had betrayed them. They never had to choose between letting murderers go free or taking justice into their own hands. I made my choice, and I'd make again. Danny was alive. The people who tried to destroy our family were gone, and we had a future